Morning everybody, welcome to this week's midweek thought for the day, which is going to be about Deborah. So we looked at Jael a couple of weeks ago and now it's Deborah's turn, and they're contemporary, they're women who are contemporaries, and we hear what happened to them in the same part of the Bible. So their story is in Judges 4 and then Judges chapter 5. So interesting story about what's happening for these women. I read Judges 4 before, so I'm going to read Judges 5, and this is called the Song of Deborah. It's kind of a historical song. Then Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang on that day, saying, "When locks are long in Israel, when the people offer themselves willingly, bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured forth water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased and travellers kept to the byways. The peasantry prospered in Israel. They grew fat on plunder, because you arose, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, then there was war in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. Tell of it, you who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk by the way, to the sound of musicians at the watering places. There they repeat the triumphs of the Lord, the triumphs of his peasantry in Israel. Then down to the gates marched the people of the Lord. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake, utter a song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then down marched the remnant of the noble. The people of the Lord marched down for him among the mighty. From Ephraim they set out into the valley, following you, Benjamin, with your king. From Machir marched down the commanders, and from Zebulun those who hear the martial staff. The chiefs of Issachar came with Deborah, and Issachar faithful to Barak. Into the fat valley they rushed out at his heels. Among the clans of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Why did you tarry among the sheepfolds to hear the piping for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed before the Jordan, and Dan, why did he abide with the ships? Asher sat at the coast of the sea, settling down by his landings. Zebulun is the people that scorn death. Naphtali too on the heights of the field. The kings came, they fought. They fought the kings of Canaan at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They got no spoils of silver. The stars fought from heaven. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent Kishon swept them away. The onrushing torrent, the torrent of Kishon. March on, my soul, with might. The loud beat the horses' hooves with the galloping of his steeds. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse bitterly its inhabitants, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women most blessed. He asked water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a lordly bowl. She put her hand to the tent peg and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera a blow. She crushed his head. She shattered and pierced his temple. He sank, he fell. He lay still at her feet. At her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell dead. Out of the window she peered. The mother of Sisera gazed through the lattice. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariots? Her wisest ladies made answer. Indeed, she answers the question herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil? A girl or two for every man. Spoil of dyed stuffs for Sisera. Spoil of dyed stuffs embroidered. 2 pieces of dyed work embroidered for my neck a spoil. So perish all your enemies, O Lord, but may your friends be like the sun as it rises in its might. And the land had rest for 40 years. So that's a long read for the beginning of today's thought for the day. So Deborah, we hear about her twice. The Judges 4 is a kind of historical, very factual prose relation of what's happened, narration of what's happened. And the Song of Deborah, this kind of song with the images in it, is poetry. It's poetry which tells the truth. It's a song which tells the truth. It's from a very oral tradition. And I've been thinking about today and reading up a bit about Deborah. So Deborah was a judge and she passed judgment. She was a prophet, so she listened to God and spoke God's truth, but she also made decisions about things. That was what the judges did. She was a judge and she sat underneath a palm tree. I was thinking about that earlier. I think not a coconut palm. It would have been a date palm or something which was less fatal for it if it fell on your head. But she sat underneath a palm tree, and that was where people went and they asked her questions and she gave decisions. And when she spoke to Barak, she said to him, okay, now is the time for you to go and attack Sisera, the general, and his armies, so that you can defeat them, and Sisera will be given into your hands. Now, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because actually Jael kills Sisera, and she's lauded for it. But Deborah made that decision. She was the person who made that decision that they were going to go for it. They were going to go for the attack at that point. And Barak went, that's fine. We'll do that. We'll do that. And to be fair to Barak, they killed almost everyone else apart from Sisera. Sisera was running away when Jael kind of swept him up in a kind of, I don't know, was it technically a rear guard action? I'm sure there's some technical word for that. But the Song of Deborah is possibly one of the oldest bits of the Bible. So it predates the main text. It sits in there as one of the things of the songs with which Israel defined itself as part of the oral tradition. It's interesting, isn't it, when we listen to Desert Island Discs, the songs that people choose which define themselves, and how would we do that as a nation? Do we still have songs which define ourselves? But they were essential in a pre-written culture. The Song of Deborah is very, very, very old. It is probably from the 12th century BC or the 11th century BC. And that is so long ago that I find it hard to think about it. When you look at the things which were going on a similar sort of time to this, when Deborah was alive, it's things like the Trojan War, which is the stuff mixed of fact and legend. And it has things like which ancient pharaoh was ruling in Egypt. It's a part of our most ancient writings. So Deborah is a long, 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 long time ago, and very unusually gives commands to a military general. This is reported, not in many other places, but that's what she does. And I've been trying to work out what this story has for us today at the moment. What would it be that we would be thinking about Deborah and that we would like to think about Deborah? Now, much as I quite like to sit under a palm tree today, that's not going to happen. So yeah, that's not going to happen. But there are things about Deborah's thinking which we don't really know because the literature is so ancient. We have the song and we have this little bit in Judges 4. This is what happened. She told Barak, you do this. Barak did it. Sisera escapes. Jael kills him. And when that happens, there is peace for 40 years. 40 years. 40 years of peace was a long time for peace in that type of environment. So today I've been thinking about how we listen to people's stories, how we weigh things up in the argument. We don't really know all that much about Deborah. She's described as the wife of Lapidoth, but actually that's not really a common male name, and it might be that actually she wasn't a wife, she was a torchbearer, but we don't really kind of know how that works. So there's two sides. One is, isn't it great a wife can do this amazing judging and still be a wife? Or maybe she wasn't a wife, maybe she was always just Deborah. She was a wise prophet. We don't know how good Deborah was at strategic planning. We don't know how much she's observed the armies, had messages, wondered what was going on, knew what was going on, had networks, and how much she was listening to God. What she says to Barak is, go and God will give you the army into your hands. In fact, she says God will give you Sisera into your hands. So she is using perhaps her strategic wisdom and her listening to God to work out what is going to be the wise decision to make. It's interesting, isn't it, that God picks up Sisera with Jael. I can't see how that could have been in Deborah's plan. I can't see how Deborah would have seen that that was what God was going to do. And then there's that balance, isn't there, in any strategic decision that we make a decision based on the evidence that we have, the information that we have. We try to listen to the whole story, and then we make that decision and we pray that it's the right decision and that God will act in that decision. And that's what happened here. So Deborah sent Barak and the army, and God was like, oh, he's run away. Well, Jael will sort this out. In the end, it was a difficult thing because it was a decision for war. And there are all sorts of things about just war, what you think about the justice of war. That's a whole other hour-long Facebook Live. But it brought peace. It was a difficult decision, but it brought peace. So the things that I'd like us to think about Deborah this week are, how was she so wise in a very, very ancient world? How did she listen to what was going on? How did she know what was going on? How wise was Barak for listening to Deborah? And yet, when the plan didn't go quite as Deborah thought it was going to, she trusted that God would pick it up. And that's what God did. We have to make some strategic decisions as a church this week about reopening for private prayer and what that will mean. And some of it's really boring risk assessments, which are really important, but they're not the thing that I like to do most in the world. But I do like to keep people safe. So we'll be looking at those this week and thinking about whether or not we can safely open our church buildings for prayer next week. We'll be praying about it, we'll be thinking about it, we'll be using the evidence that we have and asking God if he will bless that. And we'll also be asking God if he will bless that for peace. Whatever we do, we're building peace. That was Deborah's aim. That was why she wanted or saw the need for war, because it would bring peace. Difficult questions, difficult decisions, looking for God's will and trusting that he can sort out the bits that don't go how we thought they were going to work out. So that's my thoughts on Deborah for today. Hopefully I'll see you all soon, and I'll speak to you all soon. Okay, bye.